To the TED Fellows Nairobi Forum. And my name is Sheila Obim, formerly known as Sheila Chuboju. It's a long story. Change your name, me and Prince, Anyway, so we're here today, and it's really informal. It should be fun. We're going to talk a little bit about our origin story. We are the OGs of TED, the first cohort of TED Fellows. Oh, geez. So we want to talk a little bit, and it's nice for us to catch up because we actually haven't sat together on a stage in a very long time, nearly, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And we're going to talk a little bit about our journey as TED Fellows, collectively and individually. Talk a little bit about what TED offers in terms of a platform for telling wonderful stories. And personally, my interest as Alliance for Science is how can such platforms, networks of extraordinary people help us to elevate a super league of science champions. So we'll get to that because I think that as the superheroes are needed for the global challenges that we face. And amongst you, there are many extraordinary people, and we will call on you. But it's going to be a Q&A. There'll be a roving mic. And we have a special TED Fellow from Sudan, 2022, who's flown in specially to join us, so we'll give him some time. And basically that's it, and then we'll just keep on drinking and talking and having fun. But I will start with this big fellow on my right. Introduce yourself.
My name is Tunji Lardner.
Really?
My name is Tunji. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm a TED Fellow. It almost sounds as if you're at the AA meeting. My name is but that's all there is. That's all there is. I met Sheila, 18 years ago? 2007, right? The first TED Fellowship. I'll give you the backstory to that eventually, but that's who I am. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Juliana Rotich. I am a TED Fellow, TED Senior Fellow, and currently non-exec director at Pax Technologica, amongst other hats that I wear in business.
Good evening. I am Joshua Wanyama, 2009 TED Fellow, and currently I'm the commercial head for consumer business at Pesapal Limited.
This is not a great mic. So in 2007, TED, TED was always an exclusive billionaire billionaire club. And they would hold gatherings in Monterey, and it was really a place where they would share ideas and get invigorated about the next big thing in technology, entertainment, and design. And that had been going on for decades. And after a while, they realized that the community needed some refreshment, needed an infusion of new ideas from outside of their closed network. And they asked Emeka Okafor, who's, actually I don't know what he was doing in New York, but everybody seemed to know Emeka, and he seemed to know absolutely everybody. And they asked him to curate a special platform so that the TED network, TED conference could come to Africa for the first time in 2007 in Arusha. And he started reaching out through his Timbuktu Chronicles. He seemed to know anybody doing anything that is cutting edge, and in those early internet days, he really was a super influencer. So he found lots of incredible African innovators, inventors. And my personal story is I was a scientist in Oxford, and then I had left and I'd started doing some work with creatives around creative science in London, helping to inspire young people to go into science. Anyway, but I had this idea about, scientists, because I was a genetic scientist, but we didn't have the visualization tools that they have these days to imagine the genes, like where you're going to cut, what does it mean? And I kept telling people we need creative tools to help us visualize, to make decisions. We don't have them. And anybody who'd listen to me, I'd have this conversation and they'd be like, nerd, and they'd walk away slowly. Lost a lot of friends. And I was at a dinner party next to some guy, and I was like, so I think we need these design tools to visualize. And he's looking at me like, yeah. And he said, you know what? There's this thing called TED. Yeah, you should look it up. They're kind of like people like you, yeah. And I didn't know what he meant, and I thought he was being rude, so I just ignored him. But a few days later, I was sitting in a cafe with my laptop, and I Googled TED, and I saw, ooh! And the Arusha conference popped up, and it said, apply if you have an idea. And I was like, oh, somebody will listen to me. So I said, so I have this idea. And I wrote one long, windy email. And 2 days later, I got an email saying, would you like to come to Arusha and share this idea? I was like, oh, so great. And so that's how I ended up in Arusha in 2007. What about you?
I have a little bit of a backstory, like I said. I actually met Emeka in New York when we were still planning, and introduced me to Chris Anderson. And they had this idea of a TED event in Africa. But of course, my ears perked up, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, we can do this. And meetings upon meetings, basically what they wanted was to have an Africanized version of what they had been doing in Monterey. And so it meant they had to curate it to have a broad spectrum of Africans and Africanists coming to Arusha. It was an experiment. If we had flopped, well, that would have been the end of that. So my job in terms of helping Emeka frame the agenda, also to look for interesting people who would want to come. And the person they want, A-lister, was then Finance Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. I'm sure you guys know who this lady is now. She's now, well, no, WTO. Yes. So, it sounds as if I'm name dropping, but then she was my friend. And so I said, look, Ngozi, there's this thing, it's going to be African. She was like, ah. So I said, I don't think man's schedule planned for this thing. She said, no, you should press and press and press. So we pressed, and she eventually said, okay. When she saw the lineup, and I introduced her to Emeka, who was very persuasive. So she said, okay, she was going to come. So that was the first A-lister. The second person that I was going to bring on board was Dele Olojede, colleague, friend of mine, fellow journalist, Pulitzer Prize winner. I think the only African, actually. And there's this thing happening. I want you to come. It's going to be in Arusha, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sure, let's go. Then the third person was, what's the guy's name? The African leadership guy. The school, the African Leadership Academy. Oh God, his name is, no, it's Ghanaian. No. Sorry? Yes, Fred. Yes, Fred. I'd met Fred in South Africa about a year before then. We were having conversations. He was telling me about his experience teaching in Botswana. His mother was a teacher, and they had all these wonderful ideas. He would like to do this, that, and the other. So I said, well, this thing's all about ideas worth spreading. So I kind of finagled him in there because it was like, okay, education, Fred. But I insisted that this guy had a message and, something to share. And so the three of them, Ngozi, Fred, and Dele showed up, and one or two other peripheral, because it was all experimental. And it turned out to be a life-changing experience for all of us, because for the first time, we had a glimpse of Africa's intellectual capital, all brought together in a place where the idea, the sum total of the content was all about Africa. Varying people with varying ideas, all centered on Africa. It was not so much as making Africa great, nothing that fancy, but we're just talking about the continent itself. And it was the very first time I realized that the whole of Africa is far greater than the sum of its parts. And it was just a wonderful experience mingling with them. And it was a documentary about Nollywood, which he was an integral part of. Something like that. Nah. But that was Peace talking about Nollywood, the reasons why Nollywood was created. We had to tell our own stories. We had to da. And I just couldn't believe it. So the very next, after that conference, I made sure she applied. And with a little bit of prodding, she became a TED Fellow. I think TED Fellow India. That was the, but that was the, foundational experience of TED. There are other stories about how it has evolved over time, and but let me just stop now with the two dominant themes that came out of that: aid versus trade.
Yes, because Bono came.
Bono came preaching AIDS, and what's the name of that other lady from?
That wrote the book.
That wrote this book. Moyo, yes. Gambisa Boyo, fierce lady. You know, we don't want your aid, we want trade. That's what we're interested in. So there was a schism that occurred, but it was a very good schism because it was clear that Africans are beginning to finally figure out the darker aspects of this globalization, rule-based order, the Bretton Woods institutions, and beginning to reclaim their own identity on multiple levels. The other thing that stood out was Professor George Aite, when he was describing the demographics of Africa. And he famously said that there were two types of animals roaming the African quote-unquote savannah. There were the hippos, the old analog, aging, leader for life Africans, and then there were cheetahs, the young, agile, aspiring to be digital. And that was a framework that held for a while, up until 10 years after, where I was called upon to make another iteration of it. So that foundational thing was what set off the old TED. TED benefited enormously from it, because from that experience came the X's, the salons. Yeah, because they knew they couldn't bring everybody, so they created some kind of a franchise structure that enabled you to hold a mini TED according to certain rules. So that basically is what that whole thing is about. Really, it was, some of the brightest Africans I've met were there talking about Africa, and that was just incredible.
Thank you. And that was when Juliana and I met. Oh, I think we were just walking past each other. She was like, hi, yeah, should we get to dinner? And that was it. Lifelong friendship.
Yeah, and that's where our friendship began. And just as I said, the TED Fellows program brought together people who are kind of not one-dimensional. If you find yourself creating a Venn diagram of interests that coincide, so you have a circle with science, a circle with technology, a circle with culture, a circle with art, a circle with music, a circle with name any other interest, and all of that resides in you, and you are not in one box. TED was open to what I realized was called a polymaths. And they welcomed polymaths or people with just various interests. At the time, I was living in Chicago, and actually, I was moving from Kansas City to Chicago, and I actually quit my job because that job was not going to give me time off to attend TED. So I was just like, okay, I'll figure it out. So it was a leap of faith that, okay, I'll figure it out. So when I was meeting our then Minister Joe Musheru, at that time he had just joined as the head of Google in Africa, which was a big deal at the time because it was just like, wow, you know, Google is coming into the continent. Joe Musheru is going to leave Wananchi Telecom and head it up. And it was such a big deal. And so he asked me, so what do you do, Juliana? And I'm like, I am jobless right now. So, and I was like, are you hiring for people in Google? Anyway, long story short, I got to meet not only him, but also a couple of other Kenyans whom at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, we co-founded Ushahidi. So it brought together just these motley crew of people with just various interests. At the time, I was interested in science, technology, and renewable energy. I was writing on a blog called Afro Musing about all these various interests, including music. And I probably did the first review of just a band's album. So it's probably in the archive somewhere. So again, various interests. And they let me in, and since then, I'm super grateful not only for the friendships that I've made, but also what we were then able to build together and to be able to continue to build and to think together about what the future holds, or how we process the present in order to set ourselves up and the next generation for even better excellence, really. So this thread of African excellence has always been there. I think it's just a thing of amplifying it. Yeah.
I think my TED story starts in Minneapolis many years back when I finished university. In 2003, I started a web development firm, and a few years later, we hatched onto an idea of doing what you will probably call a content management system. Not WordPress, we were a lot more closed. So we signed up a number of local newspaper publishers within the US, so in smaller cities, who couldn't make their own websites, and we'll make websites for them and manage them. And then I got an idea to create something that will be very similar to Huffington Post, where you'll be able to aggregate daily news from Africa and then be able to work with bloggers. So one of the bloggers I'd worked with was Afro Musing, and there were various other bloggers during the notice. So from 2000 till 2010, a lot of them were doing stuff online. And they allowed me to republish their blog posts on our website. The site used to be called African Path. And so during the 2007 TED Global conference, I was actually not present, but one of the fellows there, Eric Hashman, allowed me to republish his content. So we had a whole section on my website that just specifically covered TED Global. So I think a year later, I'd gone for a convening for IBM that was around Africa, and I met Dr. Sheila. At that time, she looked at me and was wondering, this weird man, and I was looking at her and wondering, this weird Nigerian, flamboyant Nigerian lady.
Is there any other?
And we basically said hi and passed each other. A year later, I went to an African conference at Google, and I met a gentleman, and we started talking, and he asked me, what do you do? And I was like, I have a website called African Path. And he's like, I know your website. You are TED Global. And I was like, no, I was not, but I featured it. And funny enough, that gentleman was the one who was running the TED Fellows program. And so he ended up inviting me Tom Riley. And he ended up inviting me to become a 2009 TED Fellow at Long Beach. Same time, I'd actually run into Juliana in Chicago after I'd moved there during a concert. And I think it was, Samba Mapangala. Oh. Yes, Samba Mapangala. Yes, that was the concert. So Samba Mapangala was performing in Chicago, and we ran into each other for the first time. I had known her digitally for a while, and that was the first time we connected. Yeah.
So that's our origin story, and then after that, we just found synergies, did a lot of work together, did TEDx Nairobi, and just supported each other's friendship till today. But moving on, some of you may know that TED is at a moment of change. The visionary founder, Chris Anderson, is retiring and about to hand over the reins. And so he has invited people to think about TED and to think about what it means. For us, it means a lot. But I remember, I think it was 2008, after we came back from TED in London, Tunji had said, listen, there's somebody I think you really need to meet. You and him share similar ideas. And he introduced me to an extraordinary man who I called the Philosopher King. And you meet him, he's actually in the room today. And we had a conversation about TED and the amazing TED experience. And he said, TED is wonderful, it's doing great work. But when you look at the African platforms for knowledge sharing and gathering, it's much more communal. TED very much celebrates the individual extraordinary person standing in the middle of the red dot telling an extraordinary story, and you think, wow, I can never be that person. Oh my God, they're so clever. And there's a lot of wow moments in, I personally have never been able to sit through a whole TED event because my heart gets so full, I actually have to leave the room and process some of the things that I've heard. So you get a lot of that, but he was like, yeah, that's all wonderful. And at that time, he was thinking about writing a book called the Umuluabi, which is a Yoruba word, and he'll explain it more. But it's about what is the meaning of true wisdom and collective wisdom. How do we gather wisdom collectively and share it? And he spoke a lot, and I think he didn't write the book for several years after that, but he kept discussing the ideas. And he encouraged us to think differently about the TED model, and we began to. And so right now that there is a moment to think differently about the TED model, I'd like to invite him on stage. Adewale Ajadi, come on stage. I'd like him to share a little bit about, the ideas that he's been sharing with the world, because that book is now available. You can buy it on Amazon. It's out of print. We've got a reprint.
Good evening, everybody. I actually wanted to sit down there. If you don't mind, can I sit down there? I'm not a TED fellow.
He's actually a TED coach.
The people won't see you.
So, once again, good evening. I have a little share with you. And I think the best way to share it, start to share what I think, is to remember my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather, we called him Babalayeye. He was a great-grandson of someone called Balogun Bikule, which is another story entirely. But Babalayeye was such an extraordinary person. I come from a place called Ibadan. Ibadan is in western Nigeria. And Babalayeye, when I was born in the 60s, till he died, used to walk, I think, up to about 8 kilometers to our house. And what he wanted to do every evening was to tell me stories. Tell me stories about my ancestors. Tell me stories about the journey of my people. Tell me stories about today. And it was always that my existence was a contract between my ancestors, myself, and posterity. And the idea of a genius that stands outside that contract seems meaningless to me. Nobody, I repeat, nobody claps with one hand. you need something else to clap with. And so Omoluabi is recognition that every African people have an honor system. The Hausas call it Mutunchi. The name Ebira is Omoluabi. It means the elevation, the dignification of character. Because we're people that did not have anything external to us as value. Our real value was our relationship, the quality of your own humanity, the evolution of your humanity. So what I would try and do is, it's a very interesting concept if you ever have a chance to read it. But my people have curated this concept for generations. And I think a lot of different African people have done that. So when someone says Ubuntu, Ubuntu comes from that kind of honor and dignity of the humanity of the person. And that nobody stands in isolation from its community of purpose. So I'm going to talk about the 7 dimensions of Omoluabi. I'm going to use my language. And what I would encourage you to do is think about them in your own language and see whether there's something that resonates with you, with your permission. So an Omoluabi is someone who has done a lot of work to connect with purpose. So I always say Omoluabi equation is character plus choices equals destiny. Character being the sum total of your journey, your socialization, your education, your indoctrination, if you please, and your choices, which are the external interactions you make and decisions you make, leads you to where you are at. The 7 dimensions starts with the first one, which is Olaju. Olaju is about consciousness. Your consciousness of your placement, consciousness of your journey, consciousness of where you are, of your context. It is a fascinating thing to talk about consciousness today, because if we are conscious of where we are at, we are about to give birth to the real Africans. They are going to emerge in the next 10, 20 years. What do you do? What kind of ancestor are you going to be to them? A critical question that we have to answer. The second one is Oju Inu. Oju Inu means your internal journey. Have you done your internal work? How much sacrifice have you made to realize your own self-love, your own self-healing, your own self-development? Which is the second dimension. The third dimension is Ami, which is about pattern recognition. Understanding that around you, there are patterns telling you about the future. There are prophecies emerging from your awareness. So what does it mean at the moment that in Germany today or yesterday they had an election and it seems to be going rightwards? The whole of the Western world seems to be leaning to the right. Is there something in that? If you are like me, from the Sahel, what does it mean when Niger, that has the youngest age group in the world, decides that it's cutting off France, and then Mali and all of them are in that line? Is there something to learn from that? What does it mean when COVID hits and they say Africans are going to die, but we're still standing? Is there something to learn about these patterns? Is there something that connects them? So that's Ami. The next one is Iwalewa. Iwalewa is the congruent relationship between your values and your behavior. Because anytime your values has dissonance with your behavior, you are diseased. You have a disease. There's a dislocation. So alignment between your values and your behavior. The next one is Eniolasho Mi, which is really Ubuntu. Literally in my language, it means my relationships, my network is the cloak around my nakedness. It means how you hold people, where you hold people, how you evaluate and value them. So when we talk about the individual genius, is naked without people. She's naked without people. The next one is Ashe or Afoshe, which is the power of manifestation. And literally it means I speak it and it manifests. Our phone will share, I speak it to manifest it. In my language, in my culture, invocation is everything. And you know, even the Bible says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God. There's nothing more powerful than your word and manifestation of the word. And the final element is ire, which is blessings or outcomes. What are you doing all these things for? What is the change that you want to realize? What is the new reality you are trying to give birth to? It is the alignment of all these things that elevates us from people who pursue our hunger and feed our flesh to the spirits that become ancestors. Thank you very much.
Wow. So you see, I was so moved by that. I have carried that since 2008 to this moment. I have been carrying it. And what it taught me and what I held from it was the summary that I had a lot of burden, as you do in science, to try and know as much as you can, to be as clever as you can, to completely own your discipline, to be the person that is the true expert. So a lot of burden of trying to get to that. And I think one conversation with him freed me from that. And he was like, you're never supposed to know everything. You're only supposed to know half. And your job is to create the space for the other half to come. That is wisdom. Your job to go into the world with humility, knowing you only hold half of it. And that is part of what I have carried. And so, coming to that, what does that mean for TED, and what does it mean? How do we open the circle of TED? How do we open the sacred red circle to allow you in and everybody else in to see what wisdom is lacking and what can come from you? And because it's important to have symbols, because it's important to see some things, we're going to invite this beautiful lady, Princess Nyadola, to come and open up the circle for us. Who's going to cut the circle? I think it has to be you.
Happy to.
Yeah. How are we going to do it? Do you want to start from here?
I feel like you must see these beautiful women.
Turn around.
Turn around.
Go ahead. I'll hold one corner for you. Let's do it. Okay. Now the circle is open. Now you can enter in. We open up the floor to responses, contributions, and provocations. Where's the roving mic? Who's holding the roving mic? Ladies? Maybe you're holding the roving mic. There's a lot of mics here. There's mics. So if you want to speak, raise up your hand, and I think a mic will find you. There's a mic there. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that inspirational work I've done. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Thank you. Jesus. Okay. Thank you so much for that book we have written. But because we connect it to our value, it's important to also bring another book from that Babalayeye. In our culture, you respect people. And we are losing that structure to the new generation. Baba is a fact. Ayeye is Instead of calling the man old father, grandfather, the way of honor, they
Oh,
hello.
yeah, it's okay.
Thank you so much. So they nickname him Babalayeye. It's like you are saying you are from Kisumu. Your father is living in Kisumu. Say your father of Kisumu. That connection is our true identity in Africa, which you might write another book from it. Why do we trend to value the wisdom of our fathers? That when they want to say something, they attribute true character to the personality that is behind the voice. I think we can think through that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? You are very welcome. There are many people I'm going to call on, but I just want to give people an open mic session.
Excuse me, sorry. Good evening. Asante sana for allowing me to be here. And I apologize, I'm not African, I'm just Mzungu from South America, still Mzungu. Unfortunately, I moved to the US. I didn't vote for him. But now being serious between the results of the elections in Germany and what's happening in the US, it's a sign for us to realize that South Americans and Africans cannot be relying on the North to save us. We need to develop our own tools. We cannot do it in isolation. It's true that others are the cloak that dresses us. We need each other. We need international cooperation. But it is important to realize that the solutions, as important as the wisdom of our ancestors is, we live in a different world. And the solutions that used to work before are only working partially now. We need new tools like agricultural biotech, like nuclear power. And after 20 years, knowing so many brilliant people in South America, in Asia, and in Africa, I'm sure that we can do it. And that rather than allowing Europeans and Americans telling us what we should be doing, where we should be having coal plants or natural gas plants, no, you only need to have solar. We need to make those decisions. And it's going to be up to the next generation of Africans and South Americans, which is where the world population is growing, to clean up the mess that others have done. Thank you. Asante sana.
Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I'm called Cyril Peter Otieno, and I'm a Kenyan. I run a program called Internet for Scholarship. Based on what I've heard here today, from the inspiring story and stories as well, I feel there's a generational disconnect in terms of, if you look at the previous generation of our forefathers and so on and so forth to today's generation. When you look at the value system, and this has been contributed with the realization of globalization through education. And when you go to school, we have been told, work hard and be a lawyer, be a doctor. But there is part of our educational system that is missing, and that is the internal realization of oneself. And by that I mean the integrity part. And this has played very much in the role of even in our political space, where we have so much corruption and so on and so forth. And I feel from the inspiring story of connecting back to our forefathers and having that internal realization of our value system, I think is one of the things that are missing. And even as we try to curate the next space of the TED, I believe if we can be able to tap into that gap, especially to today's generation, then I think we will be able to have a bigger influence in the entire Africa in terms of having people full of integrity, people who value one another, and so on and so forth. So thank you.
What was I going to say? I told you. What was I going to say? So first of all, does it crack anyone else up, the sort of Kenyan, Nigerian, subtle competition that goes on? Because it's clearly there. It's just like, I am better dressed. Yeah, but we are nicer. Like, I have lots of oil. Yeah, but I've got lions. Like, it just and I know this from traveling around the world and being in different African groups where the room is ultimately dominated by Kenyans and Nigerians. I wonder why. Why? You got the threads and we've got the lions? I don't know what it is. No, it's kind of true. If you're going to fight for like a position in Africa, there's two pretty amazing nations to do that. So you said you wanted us to cause trouble or be provocative, right? So, as you said... What's that? Me, I'm Australian.
No worries, mate. No worries.
Me, I'm Australian. And so, like, our, Kenya versus Nigeria is like Australia versus New Zealand. It's like two... Who cares? Like, we do. So, okay, you broke the circle open, right? And as you said, Chris Anderson announced a different direction for TED going forward. And they're looking for a different place for it to be, a different set of owners, a different direction for the organization. I would put it back to you guys that if there's one place that TED, which has been committed to the future of thinking, should base itself in the future, it is Africa. Now, I would go for Kenya over Nigeria. Just me saying. But the point is, if they're going to be bold, they're not going to move from New York to Connecticut. They're never going to go to China. India's not going to take them. Europe would be a backward step. So how could we be brave here and in Nigeria to see how we could get Africa involved in the future of TED in a major, major way? End of my comment. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Julius Gatune. I'm from Kenya. She likes my very good friends, and I actually do like Nigerians. So, but I just want to talk a bit. I think we got some very, wise words from the gentleman. I actually have the book. So I have and I read it. But what I wanted to bring about and maybe reflect, because these values are going to become more and more important because what I am, I do foresight, so I'm kind of a futurist, work we have been doing together with Sheila for quite some time. And one of the things that, if you're carefully watching the world right now, we are in what you may call the cusp of a huge, huge change. Obviously, one of the ways you see is Europe going crazy, going to the right. These are people reacting to something. It's not really, there's something deeper. On the other hand, you're seeing technology that is we are the cusp of what you might call superintelligence. And what does that mean? Because when I do my talks, I always ask people, why do we worry about robots, AI, and war taking jobs? Why? Why does that matter? What is the worry about? And I always give the thought experiment. If you go back to your great-great-grandfather, somebody invoked the great-great-grandfather, really, how long do you think they worked? Because we tend to get the story that there were these people working forever. But if you look at how much they worked, it takes how much? Because you're growing 2 seasons, it takes like 2 weeks to prepare the land, another 4 weeks, maybe to weed, another 2 weeks to harvest, and so on. So you basically work 10 weeks, 1 season, another 10. Probably they work like 20 weeks in a year. And what do they do the other times? They actually had fun. They were actually singing. They were creating culture. So the question is this. If you took a robot today and you could be able to go back in time and take a robot to your great-great-grandmother or grandfather, would they be worried? And you say, this thing can work and do everything. Will they have the fears that we have if you went with it? And they say, your daughter, you have come back. One of our ancestors has come back, or one of the futures has come back and has brought us this wonderful machine. Will they all be worried? This person has brought us a curse here. Now we will not be able to work. So probably they will be very happy. So question to ask yourself, what happened that now we fear? It's because we have been programmed to think in a certain way. So you are told that you need to work, you need to get tired, you're told that fun, to be happy is bad, and so on. Yet as a human being, your job is to be creative. You are a creative being. Actually, work is just something that we need to survive. So if you can forget about work. So the question is, why can machines work for us and we do something else? And those are the things that we want to, it's like we've lost imagination as human beings. We cannot think of a different world because we are constrained in a certain world and certain structures. And until we understand why we behave the way we behave, and you can see the possibilities that are there. So fine, a machine, a robot. The other day I saw a robot that could do dentist faster than a dental, 8 times faster. Yesterday I read an article. I think some professors at Imperial College had been researching on superbug for 10 years. And before they published their paper, they gave the same problem to a computer, to an AI. It solved that problem in 2 days. You know that Nobel Prize was won by computer scientists. Actually, it was won by AI. So really, we're in a situation where we probably could have machines that are better than us. The question is, how do we be more imaginative so that we can think differently as society and restructure? Because these societies, the way it is not sustainable. That's why you have a criminal ruling the biggest country in the world. You have all, because people are trying to break it actually. So one way you want to break the society, but we don't have a replacement, and we're not thinking about it. So I want to ask people, we have to really think and break this world, but find a way to rebuild it in a different way. We have to have imagination. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to call on a number of voices I haven't heard because we have a conference coming next week, and so many of our speakers are here. And as you know, we're looking at the future of science communication, and there are many extraordinary people in the room who are coming to speak about the future of science communication. There's a gentleman I spoke to, I only got to know him a few weeks ago, former energy minister, former education minister of the great nation of Ghana, the first African nation to gain independence, and scientist, doctor, now entered into the politics and the geopolitical space. And I spoke to him about this idea. I'm one of those people, I have an idea, I tell every single person I meet. So this Super League of Science Champions, Super League of Science Champions, Super League, everybody I meet, I speak, we need a Super League of Science Champions. So I spoke to him about it, and he got it in like 2 minutes, and he said, we absolutely need that. And took even the thinking a little bit further. So I would like to invite Honorable Dr. Matthew Prempe to please say something about why we need science champions. Welcome, sir.
I was trying to hide. I was trying to hide. Well, thank you for inviting me. What was the question? What was the question?
Why do we need a Super League of Science Champions?
It seems we need a Super League for everything.
Yeah.
We need a Super League of pastors to prophesy. We need a Super League of footballers to entertain us. We need a Super League of boxers to be able to excite us to watch boxing. We need even a Super League of politicians to excite us in politics. So for me, I don't think it's anything different to say that without a Super League of science champions, science will not be heard as much as it should be heard. And we live currently in a world where science has done so well, we can't believe it, that because of science, we are talking about AI. Because of science, we are talking about social media communication. And yet still, the tools that science has made available to help us live better lives are the same tools people are using to divide us and bring us down. So we need more science champions to help us understand that social media isn't bad. AI isn't bad, like my brother just said. Maybe if we get to know it better, we get to understand it better, we can appreciate and work with it to make our lives better. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Look forward. He's giving the keynote tomorrow if you're in the conference. I'd like to also invite another extraordinary science champion, Dr. Prakash, at the amazing Tuskegee University. I was so thrilled to go to Tuskegee and see the work that they do and the work that he does and how inspirational he is in inspiring the next generation of scientists and science leaders.
Well, thank you very much, Sheila. I would have really preferred a lot of young people here to be speaking and not an old hoagie like me. But nevertheless, you know, I never intended to be a science communicator. I was simply a plant breeder and a biotechnology scientist way back in the early 90s, working on sweet potato and groundnut. And then we developed a genetically modified sweet potato and peanut, both for the first time at Tuskegee University, and thought that if Dr. Borlaug could bring green revolution with just modifying just one gene in wheat, think of what biotechnology can do to the world, but never did realize that it's going to become so controversial, so much so that a lot of us, scientists working in the labs, had to come up and talk to the media and talk to the policymakers. And that's what I did 20 years ago, right here in Nairobi, in the Africa Safari Park Hotel. We conducted a workshop for policymakers. And your current president was one of the delegates who was a participant at that conference. So what is important here, and I'm going to be speaking about that a little bit day after tomorrow, is that as scientists in the past, just doing science and bringing out a great product was enough. But today, it's not enough. I think all of us who are doing science have a role in speaking about science and explaining to the public about what science is about, and especially to the policymakers. Today, I live in the United States. We have people who are advocating pseudoscience, who are advocating conspiracy theories, are in the main position, in the cabinet position. And so the country that is at the forefront of science and has won most Nobel laureates in the United States today is going to be a champion of pseudoscience. And so that is a danger to science, and gives even more cause for young people like all of you in the audience to be speaking about science, to be communicating about science, to make sure that the public and the policymakers have the tools to make the right decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I see one hand there, and we will close. Oh, two hands. Okay, we'll close after these two, and I'll invite Johannes Rieck, who I hope is in the audience.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I was just endorsing what Dr. Prakash was mentioning about the science, necessity of science. So I am from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the example of why we need science. A country with 75 million people in 72 was starving, lack of food and lot of crisis. But nowadays with 170 million people, we are almost self-sufficient in our main foods. Grain crops, rice and other potatoes, even vegetables. So everything, all the changes was made in last 50 years with the science. But the important thing is that we need good science for our farmers that will not create problem in the society, in the environment. So science should be for the benefiting people, the environment. That is important. So without science, what the challenges, what Prakash was mentioning, the next agriculture is coming with a lot of challenges, with climate change, with diseases, pest control, management, everything. So we need more to grow with less land. We need more science, more application. That has to be good for the people, for the community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Right. Gentlemen. And then Johannes.
Thank you so much. I'm the last, and I promise you I'll not bother you much. So in next few minutes, I'm going to say a few things about, on behalf of farming community that I represent in India. My name is Dr. Bhagira Chaudhary, and I run South Asia Biotechnology Center in India. You know, I hold a very different view than what being said till now. I think science and global collaboration would become much bigger significance in ensuring food security in the future than what we have seen since civilization. Agriculture and food production is changing dramatically. Farmers are facing problems that they never seen in the past. Climate change, international trade negotiations, consumer choices, which are driving them from conventional food to organic food, to sustainable food, to regenerative food. And this is changing the dynamics of how food can be produced. So I believe, based on my work that I do with large number of smallholder farmers in my country, India, on many big crops, from corn to small crop like spices, like cumin, I think international collaboration and cohesive science approach would become extremely important for the global food security. It is the responsibility of all of us, science communicators, science practitioners, policymakers, to really see this big idea of cohesiveness in food production. I would like to give a small anecdote of how export and trade dynamics with new parameters of trades are changing the way they produce food. We can no longer export food items that contain a fraction of pesticides that are being developed by countries far from where the food is being produced. So there are new big trade, technical barrier to trades. And I think without new science, technologies, innovation, and the idea of taking knowledge that we generate in laboratories to the farming field. So science has to reach there. I think I would like to call upon everyone in this house to see that the actions that we take today will have a far-reaching implication for the food, affordable food that we can get and our generation can get. Thank you so much. I'll be very happy to connect with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Johannes, are you in the room? He isn't. He is. Yay! Hey. We'll get. Welcome. You have to sit. You're a TED Fellow. Johannes is a 2022 TED Fellow from South Sudan, and we're so happy to welcome him. The world is largely forgetting South Sudan, and that's a tragedy. And he's doing extraordinary work to make sure that we don't forget. And he'll speak a little bit about what he does.
Thank you, Sheila, and good evening, everybody. Again, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Johannes Riek. I'm a medical doctor. I work and live in South Sudan. And my work currently focuses on infectious disease control and management, and health system strengthening, as well as innovation in healthcare. And just to start, I became a TED Fellow in 2022, which has given me opportunity to explore a lot of innovative ideas that other fellows and other people around the world are also trying and learning from peers and colleagues within the industry or within the healthcare sector. When I was a junior doctor, like 20 years ago, I learned that all the things I want to solve in my country, in South Sudan, I can't solve them by treating patients one by one. So I need to do my more bigger thing than I'm seeing patients on one-by-one cases. And given the context and the background of my country, we just emerged from war during that time. So a lot of our population live in rural areas. And because of that, accessibility to medical services plus affordability was a big issue. So in 2009, I set up a social enterprise, a healthcare organization that focused on rural population. So setting up a clinic focused on infectious diseases. Malaria is endemic, cholera is almost outbreak every quarter, and a lot of other preventable diseases that are in the rural areas. So we became successful setting up a number of such clinics in almost 50% of the South Sudan states. And we realized that this is also not enough. So we began with my team to work with the State Minister of Health and the National Minister of Health to help them strengthen healthcare system through research, through policy advocacy, and through surveillance. And again, with the nature of the multiple complexes that we have in South Sudan, so accessibility is an issue. You may have clinics, but delivering vaccine, delivering blood product is also an issue. So currently, the bigger thing we are working on at my level and with my organization, we are introducing medical drone to bridge the gap of last mile delivery when it comes to delivering medicines, blood supplies, and also vaccine to rural areas. So last year, we got an innovation grant, and we are in advanced stages of piloting this innovation. And this is what I'm currently working on, and I have got enormous support from TED Fellows who have also fashioned in technology. And I think this is why it is very important when we talk of healthcare, when we talk of infectious diseases, we can never miss technology, we can never miss artificial intelligence as part of this. So with tonight gathering, I wish to connect with everybody who is passionate about technology, who is passionate about infectious disease as well, passionate about also maybe medical drone. So we'd want to learn from people who are in Kenya. I believe you might have more experience than us in South Sudan, so we don't have these opportunities. So tonight is that platform to really connect with you, and I wish you a very good night, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Yes. Who? Oh, I didn't know Guido was a TED Fellow. Guido, you're a TED Fellow. You didn't tell me what year. Oh my God! Wow! Come and sit down. Wow! And there is one more contribution before we close the evening. Please come to the front. Please come. You really look like a TED Fellow.
Everyone's so cozy. Should I sit? Yeah.
So that they can see you.
Hey, everybody.
Maybe this one.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly. I am the marketing director at the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources at Michigan State University. I'm here with a delegation of my brilliant and inspiring colleagues, and it's really, I think, an amazing opportunity to learn from such deep subject matter experts in this room. It's a dangerous thing to give a communicator a microphone because we cannot be shut up, and I have been promised that there will be food in 10 to 15 minutes. Many of us, there are hungry people in the world, and a lot of them are in this room tonight. So I think that my passion is for storytelling, right? For telling stories that connect with people, because as much as we say that we're not communicating enough, there's a lot of messaging going on. But is it right? Is it connecting? Does it reflect the needs of our communities, our partners, and our stakeholders? So that means, as much as it pains me to say it, that a good communicator should shut up and do some good listening. So that's what I hope to do this week. I hope to invest in the relationships that exist in this room and the global partnerships that Michigan State University's College of Ag and Natural Resources has been building since like 1855. We talk a lot about 1855 as being the foundational point for this university, for the land grant system in the United States, but it's not 1855 anymore. The clock is ticking, and we need the communicators and relationship builders in this room to move us forward. Thank you.
All right, so we're about to let you eat final wise words. No jokes.
Wisdom is a joke. Anyhow, there were a couple of things I wanted us to string together as some kind of final framing of some of the conversations. One thing that has struck me is that in the initial phase, you talked about the transition of the TED ecosystem itself. And one of the things that I suggested, I actually wrote it and sent it off because there were requests, was something that we discussed earlier on today. And it kind of bridges the science, technology, culture gap. I've noticed that we have no elders. Everywhere I look, you have a generational gap between old folks like myself and younger folks, right? There's a story that is true. I think it was in Zimbabwe. They had a bunch of young bull elephants who were just wilding, to put it mildly, fighting rhinoceroses, just basically behaving badly. And one wise ranger said the reason why these bulls are behaving the way, especially when they're musting, is because they don't have any elders. There are no large bulls. So they made some kind of arrangement 20 years ago and exported, I think, 5 large bulls from Kruger Park and put them within this community. In 6 months, the issue was solved. And elephants, being very social beings, like humans, also have a very sophisticated sociology. So at the back of my mind, I've been thinking about this, and the suggestion for TED, which is symbolic here, is that you take out all that single-focused, libertarian genius spouting science and all that, and say, can we evolve a more communitarian, collective sense of it, right? Is there a way in which we can design a new quote-unquote TED platform, even if it's for Africa, where we invite the elders, and the elders are not designated by age. It necessarily has to be intergenerational, right? So I can sit down, like we are sitting down here, and talking about the problems that are relevant to us. It is clear the rest of the world is preoccupied with their own problems, which is just as well, because we can now look inwards and start thinking seriously about how do we solve our own problems. There's so many ideas. Today we had a wonderful session in the afternoon, and I'm hoping that there'll be a reconvening of this concept of elders, where we can sit down eye to eye. And it's not just Africa, it's South-South, like you said. There is a collective wisdom that has been ignored, right? This hyper-Western, rationalist, empirical way of looking at the world that's not our reality. That is not our reality. And I'm just going to drop two lodestones of ideas that have come to my mind over the last 10 years, looking at the dramatic changes in the world. Somebody mentioned that we're on the cusp of change, right? Well, that change is going to be from Africa. All the demographics show, everything, if you're going to strip it away from the colonial white supremacist bias, points to Africa being the renaissance point for the future. Indeed, we're back to the cradle of humanity to save humanity. But let us focus first on ourselves, right? There were about two things that struck me when we had the TED Arusha Part 2. That was 2017. Everybody, and it was focused on Africa as usual, everybody that came on stage made a nod to the ancestors. It was just, it was just reflexive, right? So that set me thinking a couple of years thereafter, what is this thing about us as Africans that we've abandoned for westernization? What is this thing that we have collectively? What is this gem? What are these diamonds we have? And one of the things that came up, and I've written about it, was the idea of time. We're getting into this linear rush that somehow the world is going to end and everybody's going to go. No, we're not like, that is not the way we view time. And it's clear that if you're going to go into the whole modernity theory and the linearity of time, it doesn't apply to us really at a very deep sense. So there was something I wrote at university a couple of years ago about time conflation challenge, not time dilation a la Steve Hawkins. There's actually a TEDx, I was floating the idea of time conflation. As an African, I'm simultaneously living my life in the past, the present, and the potential future. And as we now know in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, time is not linear. So we were quantum before the rest of the world caught up with our quantum consciousness. There are things like this that we really have to sit down and unearth the authenticity of who we are. This is our time. We're done with classic Newtonian physics. We're now in the area of quantum consciousness. There are all kinds of analog that describe our experience. If you're talking about quantum entanglement, we know from the village that somebody can entwine you for whatever reasons. What I'm just saying that there has to be a shift in our own collective consciousness. And that is what Wale was saying. If you do not know yourself as the prototype, the archetype, and indeed the very first example of humanity, and you cede that foundational understanding to the rest of the world that is just, in chaos. There's everywhere you go, it's just the place is going to hell in a handbasket. So just to recap here, two things. We have to form a league of champions, but we have to reconstitute the elders in our respective communities. And it's not bound by age. It's not bound by age. And that is something we've always had. The second thing that we really have to do is that all the answers are here. All the resources are here. In the next 30 years, the population of Africa will what? 1.4, it's about 2-point-something billion, right? The median age in Africa is 19. In Nigeria, my country, it's 17. So the future, literally, quantifiably and quantifiably, qualitatively and quantifiably, depends on Africa. And we're sitting down, wringing our hands. Oh, woe is us. The Muzungus have done us bad. Oh, this, that, and the other. Wale said something. The new generations of Africans, these young people who are being born, they don't have time for this BS. We have, as elders, have to prepare the grounds for them. That is our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have the pleasure and the privilege of knowing a lot about my ancestors. Some of them I know came from Africa. They were taken away. Some of them were native to South America. Some of them were Europeans looking for a better life, hopefully. So I have been focusing my life mostly looking forward and, training myself in that Western discipline of being rigorous and measuring everything and quantifying everything. And I became a data scientist. And at one point I realized that knowledge doesn't exist in the vacuum. If I give knowledge to someone and they cannot relate it to something they already know, it's lost. It's just the way our brain works. Our brain works in terms of networking, connecting things to others. And even worse, if I give a piece of knowledge that contradicts something that they think they know, it might be wrong, but if they think they know that, it will be rejected. And my work as a data scientist, it's not complete with finding out something and finding this correlation or this piece of data that's key. No, because if it's not acted upon, then it's lost. What's the point of all this work? So I realized that we have been, it's necessary, not just the hard math and the hard fact, but also the storytelling and trying to understand who are you talking to and how can you connect with them. And I'm very glad to be here, both as a TED Fellow and as a Cornell Alliance for Science Fellow, because that's how I understood why all this science communication that I've been doing was just hitting my head against the wall, because I was not accounting for the fact that Homo economicus, it's a lie. We're emotional, we're social animals, and until I didn't understand that, I wasn't more successful. So my message tonight is that we need to learn from each other, not just in terms of South-South, but also different specialties, because the misinformation that's going on around GMOs and about vaccines and about 5G and about nuclear power, it all follows very similar patterns. So I'm very glad that there's 2 tracks tomorrow and there's energy people here, because we have a lot to learn from each other and we can teach a lot to each other. Thank you.
Again, as someone who came from a medical background, I'm always interested in correlating clinical work with the technology. And the African continent has been behind in terms of science and technology for more than 50 years. And the emergence of technology in this 21st century is something we can harness as African and as an African continent. So, for example, for a very long time, we have not been designing tools that we can better use for our contact. And now technology and artificial intelligence are making easy to share experiences across the continent. So this is something I believe we need to adopt the technology so we can be able, something that requires us to move overseas, we can now be able to learn it digitally, without having to go anywhere. And in that way, we can be able to have better prevention tool, better diagnostic tool, better even fast-track discovery of medicine within our own African continent. So most of the time, the medicine we use for malaria, for example, have roots within African continent. And through technology, we can be able now to know how these people have been doing it. And we can be able to do this and replicate the same, or even in a much more better way within our context, since we have the resources here. So my message is that technology cut across all sectors. And as people from science background, from medical background, technology should be for our better use. We should not fear that it's going to displace my job as a medical doctor. No, it's even going to make my work more better, more easy, and even increase my thinking capacity in terms of thinking of what could be the problem, So this is what I can say. And of course, we have a lot of experience that we need to share. I think this is the gold standard, sharing. is always, the best that we can be able to do whatever we want to do. So thank you.
I'll be a bit brief. So there is a TED speaker. He spoke at TED 2017, Dr. Clapperton Mavunga, who currently teaches at MIT and has written and is currently writing another book. So what I'd like to share is actually the title of one of his latest books from last year, and the title is Dare to Invent the Future: Knowledge in the Service of and Through Problem Solving. And the reason why I want to mention this is because the overarching thread that I see not only from 2007, 2017, and also here and in the conversations we're having now is the importance of science, technology, arts, culture, and what the other two C's are creativity and community, which are really coming very strongly from Wale's challenge to us to think about all those 7 dimensions, not only in our own lives, but in also the work that we do, whether it's in business, whether it's in academia, whether it's in whatever it is we're doing. And so if we were to dare now to invent the future, what are the things that we can give as gifts to the next generation of builders who can build on top of what we've done so far, and help to create this future that some of us may not see it, but we will have done our part and we will be okay with that. And there were, in the recent conversations that we had at Davos with Peter and others, there's an incredible academic from Oxford University called Aaron Mannion. And one of the things that I've never forgotten, maybe it's because it's an alliteration, is to think about how we are integrating technology or all the science, technology, arts, culture, creativity, community, how we're integrating it, how we're iterating in our society. Wherever you're planted, you bloom. And then last but not least, and this is what I'm super grateful for, not only this community, but also this gathering, is to infinitely learn. So integrate, iterate, and continue infinitely learning, because we're in this continuum and we must continue to strive, to dare, to invent and to do better and to enjoy it along the way.
Final words.
So I think what we can all agree that has been consistent over time is change will always come. If you just look at the last 2 decades, the amount of change that has happened in technology, how we communicate, how we deal with each other in society, the tools that we use, the ability for the voiceless to now develop voices, whether people are known online or they create pseudo characters. This is happening throughout. Governments are getting toppled because of this. The ones who have are becoming richer, and the disconnect in society is widening. But I think the thing that can probably help us all is if we have a foundation. So traditionally, religion has been that thing that people used as their code of ethics. Whether it is traditional religion or the more structured religions across the world. But right now what's happening is everyone is developing a voice, and you have the ability to create your own tribe, your own movement, your own following just from your keyboard. And so what foundation do we leave for our children? What foundation do we base what we do? And I think this becomes important because that's what holds us together as humanity.
Thank you, guys. You've been really patient. Now you can go eat. I think Michael is going to close off this event.
Thank you very much. First of all, a round of applause for all the fellows that are up here. Thank you for the excellent job that you've all done. I think this is a great precursor to what we expect over the next 2 days. So just a bit of housekeeping. First and foremost, I would like to formally welcome all of you who've traveled out of Nairobi and come all the way to be with us over the next 2 days. I will ask that please socialize, meet new people. Everybody who's attending, everybody who's a panelist, everybody who's a speaker is a globally founded and a globally renowned personality. So it's going to be a great 2 days for all of us who are going to be here. So try and integrate with as many people as you can. Tomorrow morning, we start off at 7:30. So 7:30 for registration. Yes. So we start off at 7:30 so that we can all be in the room to start off at 8:30. We've got great keynote speakers who are going to be here with us, and you'll get to find out what the Alliance for Science Global Consortium is. All the partners are going to be here in the room, and it's about the future built on the foundation from the past. So welcome. It's time for drinks and some more food. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.